Close your eyes and picture a Viking. Most people immediately imagine the same image. A fearsome warrior standing on the deck of a ship, a weapon in his hand, a storm on the horizon, a life filled with battles, raids, and endless adventure. It is one of the most famous images in history. It is also one of the most misleading, because the vast majority of Vikings did not spend their lives fighting. In fact, most would have considered survival far more important than glory. Picture a bright summer morning beside a green Scandinavian fjord. Farmers are already working in nearby fields. Fishermen prepare nets along the shoreline. Craftsmen repair tools outside wooden workshops. Merchants organize goods arriving from distant settlements. This was the reality of Viking life. Most people woke up thinking about food, work, weather, and family, not battle. A failed harvest could cause more concern than an enemy army. A damaged fishing boat could create bigger problems than a distant conflict. The truth is surprisingly simple. The Viking world depended on ordinary people doing ordinary work. Without farmers, nobody eats. Without fishermen, communities struggle. Without craftsmen, tools disappear. Without traders, settlements become isolated. The famous warriors that dominate modern movies represented only one part of a much larger society. Yet this misconception continues because battle scenes are exciting. Watching people repair fences is not. But if you had actually visited a Viking settlement, you would have seen far more farming than fighting. And that is only the first myth, because the next misunderstanding may be even bigger. Movies often portray Vikings as filthy barbarians living at the edge of civilization. The historical evidence tells a very different story. Across the Viking world, archaeologists have discovered combs, tweezers, ear cleaning tools, grooming kits, and personal care items in remarkable numbers. That discovery surprised many historians, because these are not objects people carry if appearance means nothing. Picture a busy summer marketplace crowded with merchants, travelers, craftsmen, and farmers arriving from across the region. Trade depends on trust. Trust depends on reputation, and appearance affects reputation. A trader hoping to make deals wants to appear respectable. A young man seeking a marriage partner wants to appear presentable. A successful merchant wants to demonstrate status and competence. The Vikings understood this perfectly. Foreign observers sometimes commented on how frequently Scandinavians washed compared to expectations of the period. Hair mattered, clothing mattered, personal appearance mattered. This was not vanity, it was practical. In a world built on relationships, first impressions carried real value. A neglected appearance could damage opportunities. A respectable appearance could create them. That reality clashes completely with the image of wild barbarians covered in dirt and mud every hour of every day. The truth is far more interesting. Many Vikings cared deeply about how they looked. Not because they lived easy lives, their lives remained difficult and demanding, but because social standing influenced everything from trade opportunities to marriage prospects. And once again, reality turns out to be far more complex than the version most people imagine. Another popular myth claims that Vikings spent their lives becoming rich through raids. The reality was far less glamorous. Picture a crowded harbor during summer. Longships arrive carrying cargo from distant regions. Merchants unload timber, furs, tools, fish, cloth, and silver. Workers move goods between warehouses and market stalls, while travelers exchange news from across Europe. This activity generated far more stability than raiding ever could. Most Vikings never became wealthy. Most never returned home carrying legendary fortunes. Many spent years working simply to maintain their households. Trade often produced more reliable income than conflict. Farming produced more reliable income than conflict. Fishing produced more reliable income than conflict. That does not mean raids never happened. They did. And some became extremely profitable. But modern stories often create the impression that every Viking constantly pursued treasure. The evidence suggests something much more practical. Most people focused on survival first, opportunity second, adventure somewhere after that. A successful harvest could matter more than a successful raid. A productive fishing season could matter more than distant victories. A reliable trade network could generate wealth for generations. The Viking world admired ambition, but it also respected results. And results usually came from consistent work rather than dramatic adventures. That reality may seem less exciting than the movies, yet it reveals something important. The Viking Age was built by communities, not by heroes alone. Without ordinary people creating food, building ships, crafting tools, and maintaining settlements, none of the famous journeys would have happened at all. Perhaps the biggest misconception of all is that Vikings rarely traveled far from Scandinavia. In reality, they became some of the most mobile people in medieval Europe. Picture a map stretching from the North Atlantic to distant eastern rivers. Now imagine Viking ships, merchants, explorers, settlers, and travelers moving across enormous distances throughout that world. Some reached Iceland, others settled in Greenland. Some traveled through river systems connecting northern Europe with distant trading centers far to the south and east. Many never returned home. Entire communities appeared in new regions. New trade routes connected distant societies. Information moved alongside people. Ideas traveled alongside goods. Opportunities expanded constantly. For ambitious individuals, the horizon never seemed fixed. It kept moving. Picture a young traveler standing beside a crowded harbor on a bright summer afternoon. A ship prepares to leave. Beyond the horizon lies uncertainty, but uncertainty often carried opportunity. That mindset helped transform Viking society. Many people remained close to home throughout their lives. Others crossed astonishing distances. What matters is that such movement became possible. The Viking world never existed in isolation. It connected rivers, coastlines, islands, settlements, markets, and distant communities into a network far larger than most people imagine today. The famous ships were important, but the willingness to explore mattered even more. Because without that curiosity, many of history's most remarkable Viking journeys would never have happened. The final myth may be the most important. Many people imagine Vikings as a society focused entirely on war, yet the evidence points towards something much broader. Picture a thriving summer settlement beside a green fjord. Farmers harvest crops. Fishermen return with catches from the sea. Craftsmen work in busy workshops. Merchants negotiate beside crowded docks. Families prepare meals. Children learn skills they will use throughout their lives. Travelers arrive carrying stories from distant regions. Everything feels alive. Everything feels connected. This was the world that produced the Vikings, not a civilization built entirely around conflict, a civilization built around adaptation. People farmed because they had to. They traded because it created opportunity. They explored because new possibilities existed beyond familiar horizons. They built because communities required growth. And yes, sometimes they fought, but fighting alone never built settlements. It never created trade networks. It never established farms. It never sustained families across generations. The truth is both simpler and more fascinating than the myths. Real Vikings were farmers, traders, sailors, craftsmen, explorers, settlers, parents, merchants, and community builders. Some became warriors. Most became something else. That is what makes the Viking world so interesting. The reality refuses to fit inside a single stereotype. And perhaps that is why so many myths survive today. Because the real story is far more complicated than the version most people expect. The Vikings were not exactly what the movies show. In many ways, they were far more remarkable.